At my mom's birthday, she said we're not leaving you anything in our will, nodded and kept eating. Then my nephew shouted, Aunt Audrey is on TV. There was silence when they saw the banner Audrey Johnson, it Millionaire. My name is Audrey, and I'm 33 years old now. But this story starts when I was 22, fresh out of college with a computer science degree and absolutely no clue what I was doing with my life. I remember walking into that first job at Data Tech Solutions like it was yesterday. The office smelled like burnt coffee and stress, and everyone looked like they hadn't seen sunlight in weeks. But hey, it was a paycheck, and I needed one badly. My parents had made it pretty clear that the free ride was over once I graduated. So you're the new girl, said my supervisor, Mike. He was this guy in his 40s who wore the same 3 polo shirts on rotation and always had crumbs on his keyboard. You'll be working on basic bug fixes and code reviews. Nothing fancy. And that's exactly what I did for 3 years. Bug fixes, code reviews, more bug fixes. I lived in a tiny apartment that cost way too much, ate ramen for dinner most nights, and slowly paid down my student loans. My parents would call every Sunday to ask if I'd met anyone nice yet or if I was thinking about getting a real job with benefits. Audrey, honey, my mom would say, your sister Lisa is doing so well at the marketing firm. Maybe you should consider something more stable. Lisa was 2 years older than me and had always been the golden child. She had this perfect life plan, good job, nice boyfriend, wedding in the works. Meanwhile, I was debugging other people's terrible code and wondering if this was really what I wanted to do forever. But then everything changed when I got a call from Jake Morrison. We'd been friends in college, study partners for our advanced programming classes. Jake was one of those guys who could write code in his sleep and always had these crazy ideas about starting his own company. I got a proposition for you. Remember how we always talked about home security systems in Professor Chen's class? All those theoretical discussions about smart sensors and integrated camera networks? I did remember. We'd spend hours in the computer lab working on projects, dreaming about what we could build if we had the resources. Yeah, what about it? I've been working on something. A complete software package for home security, not just cameras, but motion sensors, door monitors, the whole deal. And it's actually good, Audrey, like, really good. I sat up straighter in my desk chair. Okay, I'm listening. I need a partner, someone who knows the technical side as well as I do, but also someone I can trust. We pool our savings, start our own company, split everything 50-50. What do you say? I looked around my cubicle. The flickering fluorescent light above my desk, Mike's empty energy drink cans piled up like a tower, the motivational poster that said teamwork with a picture of rowing crew that someone had drawn mustaches on. How much money are we talking about? I've got about $15,000 saved up. If you can match that, we can get started. Register the company, get some basic equipment, maybe rent a small office space, $15,000. That was basically everything I had managed to save over the past 3 years, plus I'd have to cash out my tiny 401k. If this didn't work out, I'd be broke and unemployed. Give me a week to think about it, I said. That week was torture. I kept going back and forth, making lists of pros and cons. The safe choice was to stay at Data Tech, keep getting my steady paycheck, maybe get promoted to senior developer in a few years. The risky choice was to bet everything on Jake's idea and potentially lose it all. I called my parents to talk it through. You want to quit your job to start a company? My dad asked. Audrey, do you know how many new businesses fail in the first year? Most of them, I admitted. Exactly. And then what? You'll be 26 years old with a gap in your resume and no money. Your sister is getting engaged next month, you know. She's got her whole life figured out. This is different, Dad. I know the technology. I know the market dash. You know computers, my mom interrupted. That doesn't mean you know how to run a business. Maybe you should just focus on finding a nice man and settling down. Lisa's fiancé makes good money at his accounting firm. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment for about an hour just staring at the wall. Then I called Jake back. I'm in, I said. Let's do this. 2 weeks later, I walked into Mike's office and put my resignation letter on his desk. Jake and I found a tiny office space above a pizza place downtown. The rent was cheap because the whole building smelled like pepperoni and the heating barely worked, but it was ours. We bought some used computers, set up a couple of desks, and officially registered Morrison Johnson Security Solutions. The first few months were brutal. We worked 16-hour days, living on pizza from downstairs and whatever was cheapest at the grocery store. I'd never worked so hard in my life, but I'd also never felt so alive. Every problem we solved, every piece of code that worked perfectly, felt like a small victory. It took us almost a year to get our prototype perfect. I'm pretty sure the owner downstairs thought we were homeless because we were there at all hours, and sometimes we'd fall asleep on the old couch we bought from Goodwill. But when we finally had it working, our complete home security software package, it was beautiful. Clean interface, rock-solid sensor integration, camera feeds that actually worked without lag. Everything the big companies were charging thousands for, but better. We need to get this in front of someone who matters, Jake said, polishing off his third slice of pepperoni pizza that day. Like who? Secure Home Industries, they're the biggest home security company on the West Coast. If they like what we've built. I knew what he meant. Secure Home was huge. They had contracts with half the new housing developments in California. Getting them to notice us would be like winning the lottery. Jake somehow managed to get us a meeting. Don't ask me how, he had this way of talking to people that made them want to help him. 2 weeks later, we were sitting in a conference room that was bigger than our entire office, presenting our software to 5 executives in expensive suits. Interesting, said the lead guy, Mr. Patterson. How long did this take you to develop? About a year, I said, but we've been refining the security protocols for months. The system can handle up to 40 sensors per hub, with 0 lag time on camera feeds. They asked us technical questions for 2 hours. Real questions, the kind that showed they actually understood what we built. When we left that meeting, I had no idea if they loved it or hated it. 3 days later, Jake got the call. They want to license our software, he said, practically bouncing off the walls. Exclusive partnership deal. They'll integrate our system into all their new installations. How much? I asked, trying to stay calm. $1 million, each. I literally dropped the phone. $1 million. I'd never seen that much money in my entire life. Neither of my parents had ever made that much in a single year. We signed the contract 2 weeks later. I remember sitting in that lawyer's office, trying not to shake as I wrote my signature. Jake kept grinning like an idiot, and honestly, I probably looked the same way. The money hit our accounts 3 days after that. I should have called my family. I should have told them what had happened, shared the good news. But I kept thinking about that conversation when I quit my job, how they basically told me I was throwing my life away. Part of me wanted to prove them wrong on my own terms. The only family event I went to during that whole time was Lisa's wedding. I couldn't really avoid it. Mom had been planning it for 2 years and made it clear that skipping it wasn't an option. The wedding was exactly what you'd expect. Big church, fancy reception hall, Lisa looking perfect in her white dress. Her new husband, David, was this accountant guy who wore khakis and polo shirts unironically and had opinions about lawn care. I tried to blend in, really I did, but every conversation felt like an interrogation. "So Audrey, are you still playing around with those computers?" asked Aunt Margaret during the reception. Then Uncle Robert cornered me by the bar. "You know, sweetheart, there's still time to find a nice man and settle down. You're not getting any younger." Lisa always knew what she wanted in life. The worst part was my parents. They spent the entire evening making little comments about how I needed to get serious about my future and stop wasting time on hobbies. Mom actually said I should consider taking some business classes because playing with computers isn't a real career. I smiled and nodded and counted the minutes until I could leave. After that night, I made a decision. If my family thought my career was just a phase, if they couldn't be bothered to actually listen when I tried to tell them what I was doing, then fine. I'd keep my distance until they figured out how to treat me with some basic respect. Jake and I threw ourselves back into work. With the secure home money, we could afford to hire actual employees. We moved into a real office building, bought proper equipment, started developing even better software. "We should expand," Jake said during one of our planning sessions. "Home security is just the beginning. What about business security? Government contracts? Let's perfect what we have first," I said. "Make sure our current system is bulletproof before we branch out." That turned out to be the right call. Our software became Secure Home's flagship product. Customer reviews were amazing. People loved how easy it was to use and how reliable everything was. We started getting calls from other security companies wanting to license our technology too. By the time I turned 27, our company was pulling in several $1 million a year. I bought myself a house in a nice neighborhood, got a car that didn't make weird noises, and started taking vacations to places I'd only seen in movies. I sent Lisa a package of baby clothes when I heard she'd had a son. No card, no phone call, just a box of cute outfits in the mail. I figured that was enough. For 4 more years, everything was perfect. Jake and I were best friends and business partners, our company was growing, and I was finally living the kind of life I dreamed about in college. Then Jake got sick. It started with him feeling tired all the time. Then he lost weight. Then came the doctor visits, the tests, the diagnosis that changed everything. "Pancreatic cancer," he said, sitting in our office on a Tuesday morning. "Stage 4, they're saying maybe 6 months." I don't remember what I said to that. I think I just stared at him for a long time, trying to process the words. Jake died 4 months later. He was 30 years old. Jake's funeral was the hardest thing I'd ever been through. His family was devastated, and honestly, so was I. He wasn't just my business partner, he was my best friend, the only person who really understood what we'd built together. After the service, his wife Sarah pulled me aside. "Jake wanted me to talk to you," she said, tears still running down her face. "He said to tell you that he wanted you to buy out his share of the company. He didn't want his family to have to deal with the business side of things." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I bought out Jake's 50% share for $6 million. Just like that, I was the sole owner of Morrison Johnson Security Solutions. I thought about changing the name, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Jake deserved to have his name on what we'd built, even if he wasn't there anymore. Being alone in the business was harder than I'd expected. Still, the company kept growing. Our software was installed in thousands of homes across the country, and we had contracts with dozens of security companies. By the time I turned 33, we were pulling in close to $20 million a year. I bought a bigger house, a nicer car, traveled to places I dreamed of visiting since I was a kid. Then one day, I ran into my parents. I was grabbing lunch at Tony's Pizza Palace, yeah, the same building where Jake and I had started our company. I was wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt, nothing fancy. I'd walked over from work because it was a nice day and I needed some fresh air. I was waiting for my order when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Audrey, is that really you?" I turned around and there were my parents, looking exactly like I remembered them. Mom with her perfectly styled hair and Dad in his usual button-down shirt. "Hi Mom, hi Dad." They both looked me up and down, taking in my casual clothes and the fact that I was clearly alone. "Honey, what are you doing here?" Mom asked, and her tone had that worried edge to it. "Getting pizza," I said. "They have the best pizza in the city." They exchanged that look, the one parents give each other when they think their kid is screwing up their life. "Audrey," Mom said carefully, "are you doing okay, financially, I mean?" I almost laughed. "I'm doing fine, Mom. It's just that you look," she paused, trying to find the right words, "a little thin. And you're eating at places like this. There's nothing wrong with this place." "Of course not," Dad said quickly. "It's just that Lisa and David just bought a new house. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. David got another promotion at the firm. That's great for them. And little Tommy is doing so well in school," Mom added. "He's already reading at a 2nd grade level and he's only 4. Lisa's been taking him to all these enrichment programs." My pizza was ready, so I grabbed it and said goodbye. They watched me walk away, and I could practically feel them shaking their heads in disappointment. 3 months later, I had another encounter with my family that was even worse. I was leaving the downtown Hope Center, the homeless shelter I'd been supporting for the past 2 years. I went there every few weeks to check on how things were going and sometimes just to talk to the people staying there. I just finished talking to Margaret, the center director, about expanding their job training program when I walked outside and saw a familiar car parked at the curb. Lisa got out of the passenger side, looking perfect as always in her business suit and heels. David was driving, and I could see little Tommy in his car seat in the back. "Audrey," Lisa said, staring at me and then at the building behind me, "what are you doing here?" I looked back at the sign above the door that clearly said, Downtown Hope Center, Homeless Assistance. "Just visiting," I said. Lisa's expression changed from confusion to something that looked almost like pity. "Oh my God," she said. "Audrey, are you living here?" For a second, I didn't understand what she was asking. Then it hit me. "You think I'm homeless? Listen, if you need help, you should ask Mom and Dad instead of staying in places like this. They'd understand." I should have corrected her. I should have explained that I was there as a not a resident. But something about her tone, that mix of superiority and fake concern, just made me angry. "If I needed help," I said calmly, "I definitely know who to call." Lisa brightened up, probably thinking she was being magnanimous, of course. Family is family, right? I'm sure Mom and Dad would be happy to help you get back on your feet. Maybe David could get you an interview at his firm. They're always looking for entry-level people. As they drove away, I started laughing. I couldn't help it. Here I was, standing outside a homeless shelter that I basically funded, being told by my sister that I should ask my parents for help finding an entry-level job. The irony was just too much. 3 more years passed. I turned 33 in April, but nobody from my family called or sent a card. It had been like this for 5 or 6 years now, so I wasn't surprised. I'd gotten used to celebrating alone or with my employees. But a month later, my phone rang. "Audrey, it's Mom." I almost didn't recognize her voice. It had been so long since we'd actually talked. I wanted to let you know that I'm having my 60th birthday party in 2 weeks. Saturday evening at the house. Lisa will be there with David and Tommy, plus all the relatives. I'd like you to come. I was quiet for a moment, surprised by the invitation. And Audrey, she continued, her tone shifting, please dress nicely. Something decent, not from a thrift store. After I hung up, I laughed out loud. After all these years, she still thought I was broke. 2 weeks later, I put on a modest but expensive black dress, the kind that cost more than most people's rent, and called a taxi to take me to my parents' house. It had been years since I'd been there. The house was packed with relatives I hadn't seen in forever. The moment I walked in, they swarmed me like I was some kind of charity case. Audrey, dear, how are you holding up? Asked Aunt Margaret, looking me up and down with concern. You look so thin, added Aunt Carol. Are you eating enough? Uncle Robert clapped me on the shoulder. Listen, kiddo, if you ever need a hot meal, my cafe always has leftovers. Come by any time. It was clear my parents had told everyone I was struggling. The concerned looks, the careful questions about my situation, they all thought I was barely getting by. Everything's great, I said, smiling. Really? Mom appeared with a forced smile and gestured toward the dining room. Let's all sit down for dinner. I handed her an envelope as we walked. Happy birthday, Mom, this is from me. She took it with a weird expression, like she was expecting something embarrassing. Without even opening it, she walked into the kitchen and I watched her toss it straight into the trash can. The envelope contained vouchers for a 2-week trip to Hawaii for her and Dad. All expenses paid, first-class flights, 5-star resort. But apparently gifts from the family failure weren't worth opening. We all gathered in the living room for dinner. The TV was on in the background, some local news program that nobody was really watching. Mom had made her usual spread. Too much food and too many opinions about everyone's life choices. I have an important announcement, Mom said, standing up with a folder in her hands. Your father and I have updated our will. Everyone got quiet. Lisa sat up straight in her chair, trying to look surprised even though it was obvious she already knew what was coming. We've decided to leave the house to Lisa, Mom continued, looking directly at her favorite daughter. She's built such a stable life with David, and they'll need the space for Tommy as he grows up. Lisa smiled and squeezed David's hand. Tommy was playing with his food, completely oblivious to the adult drama happening around him. Then Mom turned to me with this expression that was half pity, half disappointment. Audrey, we've decided not to leave you anything in the will. You haven't really achieved anything meaningful in your life, and we feel our assets should go to someone who will use them responsibly. The relatives around the table started murmuring their agreement. I heard phrases like make sense and probably for the best floating around. I just nodded and kept eating my mashed potatoes. Inside, I was actually trying not to laugh. If they only knew that the house they were arguing over was worth less than what I spent on my car. Mom looked a little surprised that I wasn't arguing or begging. I think she'd expected some kind of emotional reaction. Then Tommy, my 7-year-old nephew who'd been mostly ignoring the grown-up talk, suddenly pointed at the TV and shouted, "Look, Aunt Audrey is on TV." Everyone turned to look at the screen. Sure enough, there I was, sitting in a professional interview setting wearing a navy blue blazer. The local business channel was replaying the interview I'd done the week before about successful entrepreneurs in the tech sector. The banner at the bottom of the screen read, Audrey Johnson, IT millionaire and CEO of Morrison Johnson Security Solutions. The room went completely silent, like, you could hear a pin drop silent. The interviewer on TV was asking me about my company's growth, and I was explaining how we'd gone from a 2-person startup to a multi-million-dollar business. They showed footage of our office building, graphics about our revenue, the whole 9 yards. After what felt like forever, Mom whispered, "What does this mean? Why are they calling you a millionaire on television?" I finished chewing my bite of food before answering, because it's true. I own a software company that makes about $20 million a year. I have a big house, a nice car, and more money than I know what to do with. Lisa practically jumped out of her chair, but I saw you coming out of that homeless shelter. I finally lost it and started laughing. I fund that shelter, Lisa. I visit regularly to make sure the programs are working and to meet with the people who run it. The whole room erupted. Everyone started talking at once, asking questions, making excuses for not knowing. Mom suddenly switched into full charm mode. Sweetheart, this is wonderful news. We need to celebrate. We should plan a family dinner soon so we can all catch up properly. You just told me I haven't achieved anything meaningful in my life, I said, standing up from the table. And that I don't deserve to inherit anything because I'm irresponsible. That was a misunderstanding, Dad said quickly. We didn't realize dash. You didn't realize because you never bothered to ask. I walked over to the gift table where Mom had set out the birthday cards and presents from other relatives. By the way, Mom, I said, that envelope you threw in the trash? It had vouchers for a 2-week trip to Hawaii. First-class flights, 5-star resort, the works. But since you threw away my gift, I'll be calling tomorrow to cancel the whole thing. I headed for the door while the whole family started talking over each other, trying to explain and apologize and ask questions all at the same time. I called a taxi from the front yard and didn't look back. My phone started ringing before I even got home. First Mom, then Dad, then Lisa. I ignored all of them. The next morning, Mom sent me a text. I never said I didn't want the gift. You have no right to cancel those trips. When she called later that day, her voice was honey sweet. Audrey, honey, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. Let's meet for lunch and talk about everything. It's too late for that, I said. You already made it clear what you think of me. I hung up and immediately started getting calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Cousin Mike wanted a loan to start his restaurant. Aunt Susan wondered if I had any entry-level positions at my company for her kids. Uncle Robert suddenly wanted to invite me over for dinner, just to catch up. It was pathetic, really. 7 years of treating me like a disappointment, and now they all wanted to be best friends because they'd seen my net worth on television. I blocked every single number, Mom, Dad, Lisa, David, all the aunts and uncles and cousins who'd suddenly remembered I existed. My phone finally got quiet. 6 months have passed since Mom's birthday party. Last week I ran into my cousin Jenny at the grocery store. She was the only one who hadn't called asking for money after the TV thing. Hey Audrey, she said, looking a little embarrassed. Listen, I just wanted to let you know that you're like the main topic at every family gathering now. They're all talking about how much money you have and calling you selfish for not sharing it with the family. I laughed. Seriously? Aunt Margaret keeps saying you're greedy and that family should stick together. Your mom tells everyone that you've gotten too big for your britches and forgotten where you came from. What do you think? Jenny shrugged. I think they had 7 years to treat you like family, and they chose not to. Can't really blame you for moving on. As I drove home in my car, I realized Jenny was right. I'd given my family plenty of chances to be part of my life. They'd chosen to judge me instead of support me, to assume the worst instead of asking questions, to treat me like a failure instead of celebrating my success. And I'm fine without them.